Now, the reason that your app runs right out of the box is because of the conventions used when the app was created. When using MVC, you will hear the phrase convention over configuration or coding by convention. And all a convention is, it is a framework default. So it reduces the number of decisions that developers have to make so that you can create apps faster. There's a lot of customization that you can do within the MVC framework. And then there are changes you should not make. If it involves a convention that is kind of critical to the way the application works, then it is a change you should not make. For example, when you name your project, okay, we've named our project, and what it does is it creates a name space using that name. Okay, that is one of the conventions. And if you decide to rename this, that is going to be a problem because all of your namespaces are going to be wrong, okay? And you'll get errors. So that is a convention. It is something done by default. And so it is simply easier not to try to rename it. Other conventions, if we look at the controllers folder, now the controller basically handles all URL requests. So, when you're on the address bar and you key in a web address, that is a URL request, and all requests go through the controller. Also, if you, let's say, wanted to create a new entry, okay, when you submit the form, that actually goes through the controller too, because that's another type of request. Okay, so the controller kind of handles everything in the application. And you'll notice that the folder is called controllers, but a convention is to take the name of the view, okay, or of the view directory, which in this case is home, and add controller to the end. Okay, so we have a controllers folder, and then we have a home controller, and that goes with the home view. Okay, and the reason they go together is because when a command comes in and it wants to display, the launch page or the startup page, that page is the index page in the home folder. Okay, and so the command actually comes through the home controller. It would be right here, and that takes it down to this home view, okay, and specifically the index view. Okay, so these kind of line up. We've got home, we've got the home controller. The models are just C# classes that store or define the data that we are going to store in a database table. So this is just a default one for errors. So if there's an error that is flagged, you can see that there's a request ID, and then there's a Boolean value of true or false. Okay, so that's just a little default class. You will be creating classes that will be used to actually store data. So I'm going to launch this and show you a little bit more about how the home controller and the view kind of interact. So if you had multiple controllers, you can actually go to any view by keying in the name of the controller, a slash, and then the name of the action method you want to execute. The action method matches the Razor page that you want to go to. So if I want to go to the index page, I can key in index. Okay, so we've got the names of the pages, okay, and those match up with, these are called action methods. The name of the action method is the name of the Razor page. Okay, and so if I want to go to privacy, right, that's in the home controller. So I can key in home slash, and then I key in privacy. And that takes me to the privacy page. So it's home controller slash, and then, whichever one of the pages you want to go to. So if you want to go to index, or if you want to go to privacy. We don't have a lot of options right now, not a lot to look at, but that is kind of how it works. Okay, so we've got model, views, and controllers. Okay, that is the MVC framework. Now, there are other things that you see in here in addition to the models, the views, and the controllers. We have something called www root. So inside there, that is where you will put any of your CSS. If you want to add libraries, you'll see that Bootstrap and jQuery are here, but you can add other libraries to your project and use commands from them. You can add other frameworks to your project and use commands, but this is where they would be added. And then you can see here is where we've got the site JavaScript. Okay, so we've got our site CSS, we have our site JavaScript, and then we've got the different icon or the different libraries. Let's see, properties. So the properties basically have launch settings.json, and these are just some of the settings for our app. You can see that the environment is development. And you can see the port it's using. And you can see that we are not requiring authentication here. Okay, and I'm not going to have you kind of mess around with these to start with, so I just wanted to show you what was in there. We also have something called Program CS. In older versions of .NET, .NET 5, for example, we had a startup CS and a program CS. And what they did in .NET 6 is they combined them. So they're not separate anymore. They are just one file. That is the major change that they made going from .NET 5 to .NET 6. And so this is the starting point for the application. You'll notice at the bottom is the run command. Okay, and so this is the main method. Okay, so all of your C# programs have to have a main method. This is where it is in an MVC app. We have an object called builder. Okay. And then from our builder object, we are adding the controller with view services. Okay. And we create a little app object from that. And it's the app object that we use to add in our middleware and to configure routing and to actually launch the program itself. So this first little if statement is just checking to see if we are in development. Okay? Because if we're in development mode, it's going to give some more user-friendly statements. And then the middleware, probably the more important middleware, would be routing, because this affects when you key in the address, it affects where things go. Authorization, we have not really turned that on, but it is enabling that middleware. And then by default, map controller route affects if they don't key in a controller and they don't key in an action method. If they just go to the main site, map controller route tells them where to go for the default. Okay, so by default, when this launches, it goes to the home controller and the index action method. Okay, and then you'll notice that there is an ID parameter that is optional. And that's what that question mark means. So if we look at our code, I don't see ID coming in, but we will be changing that because it is allowing for an ID. Okay, so we are going to be making some modifications to this. Okay, but hopefully you have an idea of how this is set up. I think the only thing I didn't talk about was app settings. And when we are ready to do migrations, add in models, and generate our database, code will automatically be added to this. So we'll be taking a look at this later. Dependencies, right now, we don't have a lot. I mean, obviously, we're using a specific framework, and that's pretty much all you're going to see in there.